Have you ever wondered why some of the most intelligent, emotionally complex, and deeply observant people barely exist online? Why their profiles look empty, yet their minds are overflowing? It's not shyness. It's not disinterest, that it's psychology, dark, layered, and born from experiences they never talk about. People who don't post on social media aren't hiding from the world, they're studying it. You learn a lot about people when you choose silence over exposure, when you watch instead of perform, when you observe instead of broadcast. And maybe that's the first quiet truth that sits inside you. The understanding that the world reveals itself to you more honestly when you're not trying to be seen by it. People who don't post on social media aren't just avoiding attention, they're creating distance. A deliberate gap between themselves and a world that moves too quickly, judges too harshly, and consumes too carelessly. And while most people treat social media like a digital diary, pouring out every emotion, every outfit, every dinner, every thought, you stand on the outside, watching it all with a strange mix of curiosity and caution. You don't hate social media. You don't fear it. You simply don't trust it. Not in the way other people do. Not in the way the world has conditioned everyone to believe that being visible is the same as being alive. Because you've seen something different. Maybe too early. Maybe too deeply. You've seen how attention can turn into scrutiny. How sharing can turn into vulnerability. How vulnerability can turn into embarrassment or exploitation. And so you stay quiet. You stay invisible. You stay untraceable. People assume you're private, reserved, low profile. But that's merely the surface of a far more intricate psychology, a silent architecture built from years of experiences that taught you one unmistakable lesson. Some things are safer when kept inside. The truth is, many people don't understand what it means to have a mind that monitors everything. But you do. You notice the shifts in tone, the subtle expressions, the unspoken motives behind someone's post. You read between the lines while others skim the surface. And because you can see what others hide behind their curated images, you're far more aware of how easy it is for people to misunderstand what they see. The world online is a distorted mirror, and you've never wanted to see your reflection twisted by someone else's perspective. You learned early how fragile identity becomes when placed in public hands. Maybe you grew up in a home where you were watched too closely and understood too little. Maybe you were judged for things you never said, criticized for emotions you never expressed. Or perhaps you were the kind of child who was expected to be perfect, a clean, polished version of yourself presented to the world like a product. Every flaw hidden, every impulse corrected, every need minimized. When you grow up like that, you learn something crucial. Exposure comes with consequences. So as an adult, you don't play the same games everyone else does. You don't feel the need to announce your victories, parade your relationships, or display your lifestyle. Your inner world is not a showroom. It's a sanctuary. And sanctuaries must be protected. People mistake this as introversion or shyness, but it's not. It's strategy. Quiet is your camouflage. Observing is your power. And silence is your shield. Most people post online because they need validation. They need to be witnessed, affirmed, recognized. But you're built differently. You don't require external applause to exist comfortably within yourself. If anything, praise makes you suspicious. Approval makes you alert. Attention makes you calculate what it will cost later. That you've learned to navigate life like someone who understands that every piece of information you offer is a potential weapon in the wrong hands. This isn't paranoia, it's historical memory. Bodies remember danger. Minds remember humiliation. Nervous systems remember exposure. And somewhere along your life, you experienced something that taught your brain to proceed carefully, deliberately, quietly. So you became the silent observer. People forget that observing is not passive. Observing is active. Observing is intelligence at rest. Observing is the ability to gather more information than you give. The people who talk the most tend to reveal the least about themselves. The people who post constantly often project more than they understand. And the people who build the loudest online identities often lack the internal stability to exist without external reinforcement. But you? You don't need the world to confirm your existence. You don't need likes to validate your thoughts. You don't need comments to define your worth. The lack of online presence isn't an absence. It's a boundary. Somewhere along your timeline, you learned a truth many people never figure out. The less people know about you, the harder it is for them to control you. Information is leverage. Privacy is freedom. Silence is power. And while this sounds poetic, it's also psychological. Human beings are predictably driven by the desire to be understood. But for someone like you, understanding yourself matters more than performing a version of yourself for strangers. Think about the way you interact with social media. You scroll, but you don't post. You observe, but you don't participate. You analyze, but you don't contribute that you're not absent. You're calculating. You watch the dynamics, the trends, the patterns, the desperation for validation, the subtle competition, the posturing. People reveal far more than they realize when they post. Their insecurities leak through their captions. Their envy slips through their photos. Their loneliness appears in their constant updates. Their desire to appear effortless becomes a performance they can never keep up with, but you prefer to exist outside that cycle. The psychological loop of sharing, waiting, comparing, adjusting. You don't crave that feedback loop because you see the trap in it. You see how it conditions people to perform authenticity instead of living it. And that's not a game you ever wanted to play. You learned early that your emotions, your thoughts, and your experiences are better held within your own hands than offered freely to anyone who happens to be watching. It's not that you hide everything. You simply choose carefully who gets access. You've learned that access to you is a privilege, not a default. And this is what makes you different. Your mind has depth, a kind of depth that isn't meant to be summarized in a caption or reduced to a digital footprint. Your thoughts are layered, intricate, often too nuanced for platforms built on speed and spectacle. You don't post because your experiences aren't entertainment. Your inner world is not content. And maybe the most incredible, unspoken truth is this. Part of you wishes the world understood how much restraint you practice every day. How many moments you capture mentally, but never upload. How many milestones you experience without broadcasting. How many emotions you feel deeply, intensely, quietly. But the world sees your silence and assumes emptiness. They don't understand that your quietness is not a void. It's a vault. You are not empty. You are sealed, and sealed things are valuable. Your silence online often hides an internal life that is vivid and overflowing. You feel intensely, but you share selectively. You think deeply, but you express cautiously. You connect slowly, but you care fiercely. You don't post your joy because joy feels sacred. You don't post your pain because pain feels intimate. You don't post your relationships because relationships feel personal. And you don't post your opinions because opinions become ammunition in the wrong environment. Your internal world is not meant for mass consumption. It is meant for those who have earned the right to hear it. That's why people who don't post on social media often have lives that are richer behind closed doors. They experience more than they document. They live more than they display. They feel more than they reveal. And while others chase aesthetic perfection, you chase meaning. While others crave attention, you crave depth. While others want to be seen, you want to be understood by the few who actually matter. This is the difference. This is the psychology. People who don't post are not disconnected from life. They're deeply connected to it, but in a quieter, more intentional way. They choose presence over performance, awareness over attention, privacy over popularity. And because of that choice, something profound happens. They begin to see reality more clearly than those who are constantly documenting it. You see the way people curate their images. You see what they choose to hide. You see the inconsistencies between their online persona and their real-life behavior. Every post is a clue. Every caption is a mask. Every image is an edited version of a truth they cannot confront offline. And because you see all of this, you instinctively choose not to participate. You understand, consciously or not, that the moment you post something, you surrender control of how it will be interpreted. You give people the opportunity to twist, critique, compare, dissect, analyze, misunderstand. You know that people project their own insecurities onto whatever they see, and you'd rather not be the canvas for someone else's unresolved issues. Another reason you remain quiet online is because you operate from internal validation, not external. You measure your worth privately. You don't need applause. You don't need the echo of approval. You don't need the illusion of popularity. You've learned that the most valuable parts of life are often the moments that no one else sees. The memories that aren't photographed. The emotions that aren't shared. The conversations that aren't screenshotted. The experiences that stay yours. And this brings us to one of the deepest psychological truths. People who don't post often have experienced what it means to be misread, misunderstood, misinterpreted. Maybe you were the child whose intentions were questioned. Maybe you were the teenager who was gossiped about. Maybe you were the adult whose honesty was twisted. Whatever it was, the result became the same. You learned to stay hidden because hiding gave you control, that there's a subtle power in staying unknown, that an authority in being unreadable, that a strength in being untraceable. You don't give people the blueprint to your identity, and that forces them to guess. People fear what they cannot predict. People become intrigued by what they cannot understand. Your silence creates mystique, and mystique creates power. But your quietness is not just strategic, it's intuitive. You've always been the type who studies people before deciding how close to stand. You watch how they treat others. You notice how they talk when they think no one is listening. You measure their intentions before welcoming them into your world. This same instinct guides your online presence, or lack of it. You choose subtlety over spectacle. You choose anonymity over attention. You choose self-preservation over self-display. And in a world obsessed with visibility, your invisibility becomes a rare discipline. But here's the irony. People who don't post online are often far more self-aware than those who do. Posting requires confidence, yes, but it also requires unconsciousness, a certain lack of awareness about how your image is perceived or interpreted. You, on the other hand, think before you act. You reflect before you reveal. You guard before you give. Your mental filter is sharper than most. You don't just ask, "What should I post?" You ask, "Why would I post this at all?" And that why, that introspective moment, sets you apart. Because the truth is, people who constantly post are often running from silence, running from their thoughts, running from the discomfort of being alone with themselves. Posting becomes a distraction, a performance, a way to prove a life they're not fully living. But you don't run from silence. You inhabit it. You make it your home. You don't fear your thoughts. You examine them. You don't fear loneliness. You understand it. This is why people like you rarely feel the need to prove anything. You've separated identity from image. That's a level of self-understanding many never reach. And because of that, your presence, when it appears, is powerful. When you speak, people listen. When you share, it means something. When you express, it carries weight. Your words are not diluted by excess. Your presence is not weakened by overexposure. There is a quiet authority in being someone who reveals themselves rarely and intentionally. People misunderstand silence. They think it's emptiness, but it's actually focus. They think it's avoidance, but it's intuition. They think it's passivity, but it's discernment. Silence is not the absence of expression, it's the presence of control. And here is the final truth about people who don't post on social media. They are not avoiding the world. They are protecting themselves from the world. They are not antisocial. They are selectively social. They are not disconnected. They are deeply connected to themselves. Silence is their boundary. Observation is their strategy. Privacy is their power. They stay hidden because they understand something essential. Not everything real needs to be seen. Not everything felt needs to be shared. Not everything lived needs an audience. Some lives are meant to be experienced, not exhibited, and yours is one of them. Most people think silence is emptiness. They think that when someone doesn't post on social media, it's because there's nothing to say. But that is the mistake the world makes. It confuses the absence of noise with the absence of depth. What they don't understand is that your silence is not a void. It is architecture. It is structure. It is a defense system you have spent years building, brick by psychological brick, without even realizing it. And if anyone ever tried to take it away from you, the entire identity you've crafted would begin to shake. Because silence is not your lack of expression, it is your method of self-protection. To understand the psychology of people who don't post on social media, we have to go far beneath behavior. Behavior is the surface. Behavior is the symptom. The real truth sits deeper, in the unconscious patterns, in the neural pathways laid down long before you were old enough to understand yourself, in the early emotional injuries that taught you one core rule: your internal world is safer when it stays hidden. This is where avoidant attachment begins to reveal itself. Avoidant attachment doesn't mean someone doesn't crave connection. It means they learn that connection is unpredictable, unstable, and demanding. It means they grew up in an environment where emotional exposure cost something. Maybe there was punishment, maybe there was ridicule, maybe there was simple neglect. But the brain learned a single lesson. When you reveal yourself, you lose something. You lose safety. You lose control. You lose emotional sovereignty. And so the nervous system reorganized itself around silence. Clean, sharp, controlled silence. Posting online is, in many ways, the modern version of standing in the town square with your heart exposed. Every photo, every thought shared, every piece of your life displayed. It is all vulnerability. It is all risk. And someone with avoidant wiring does not expose themselves without a fight. They learned early to detach, to withdraw, to hide in plain sight. They are always present but never fully reachable. They see everything yet reveal nothing. Their mind is a fortress, but not because they enjoy isolation, because transparency once betrayed them. Another psychological layer beneath this silence is self-concept fragility, a phenomenon where a person's internal identity feels unstable or easily damaged. People with fragile self-concept often protect themselves by limiting the number of situations in which they can be judged, criticized, or misinterpreted. Posting on social media opens the self to evaluation by hundreds or thousands of invisible eyes, eyes that do not know context, intention, emotion, or truth. For someone with a fragile self-concept, that amount of scrutiny is not simply uncomfortable. It is existentially dangerous. Their brain treats potential criticism the same way it treats physical threat. The amygdala lights up. The nervous system tenses. The protective instinct takes over. And so they pull back. They stay hidden. They keep their world small, contained, safe. There is also a deeper, more shadowed mechanism operating beneath the surface. Hyperselective self-presentation, a term used in dark psychology to describe people who carefully curate what others are allowed to see, not because they want to manipulate, but because they want control. Control, for them, is emotional oxygen. When they feel too seen, they suffocate. When they feel misunderstood, they shut down. When they sense judgment, even subtle judgment, their boundaries harden like steel. They are not trying to be mysterious. They are trying to maintain the last remaining territory where they still feel sovereign, their inner life. Some people grew up in chaotic environments where they were constantly misunderstood or misrepresented. Maybe their family saw them as the quiet one, the strange one, the sensitive one, the not enough one. Others were labeled incorrectly so many times that they stopped giving the world material to label. Silence becomes the shield against misinterpretation. If the world can't see you, it can't distort you. If the world can't watch you, it can't weaponize your vulnerabilities. Silence becomes identity armor. And yet, there is an